Wednesday you do Moshiach with Mrs. Nemni, right? So then you're supposed to be here. We'll have to look for documents, proof. Okay.
Always, where is it written?
How do we know?
How do we know? Where is it?
Oh, I was here.
Are you here now?
Yes.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay. So we're learning about the third base of Mikdash and that it's an integral part of the whole process of Moshiach. We went through the sources where it is in the Chumash, where it is in the Rambam, and now we're going to go to, in this book, at page 11, where it talks about the third base of Mikdash in reference to Geula, in reference to redemption. I just want to mention that there are 3 places in the Torah which we study, and that's where we know what the third base of Mikdash should look like, what are the measurements in the third base of Mikdash. So the 3 places are, one of them is the book of Yecheskel. That's the book of Yecheskel HaNavi. He was the prophet in Babel who spoke about the story that he was transported to Yerushalayim, and he saw a prophetic vision where Hashem showed him what the third base of English looks like and the measurements of every single detail. You need something?
I lost my phone. What is that?
You lost your phone?
Yeah.
Is that your phone? No.
No.
The second place is there's a Gemara. It's actually only Mishnah, but it's called the Tractate of Midos.
Where is this?
It's on planet Earth.
No, I'm saying like in which Gemara?
The Sechta Midos.
Oh,
It's called the Tractate of Midos. Midos means measurements.
wait, Masechta means the book?
Yeah. A Gemara, each tractate, the English word is tractate, but each volume is called Masechta. And in fact, many people aren't even familiar with it. I remember hearing a lecture from someone who was teaching the measurements of the Beis Hamikdash, and he said for many years he wasn't even interested in this. Only in recent years did he become interested. When he heard about the tractate called Midos, he thought it's a tractate that talks about character traits. He had no idea it's the measurements of the Beis Hamikdash.
That's exactly what I thought.
Right, but the word Midah means character traits, has another definition, it means measurements. And these are the measurements in the Beis Hamikdash. Yes.
Is there a tractate on character traits?
The tractate on character traits is Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers. Right. That's why it's called the Ethics of Our Fathers.
Sorry, the first place
The first place is in the books of the prophets called Yecheskel.
Okay.
Second place is in the Mishnah, the Mishnah with tractate Midos.
Neither.
The third place is in Rambam, Maimonides, where he brings the halachas of also how everything should be built. Now we're going to page 11, and we're going to learn about, first question is the order. What's the order of how things are going to happen? Which will come first? The ingathering of the exiles or the building of the Beis Hamikdash? What's going to happen first? First, Moshiach will build the third Beis Hamikdash, or first he'll bring all the Jews that are dispersed around the world to Yerushalayim. So there's a verse in Tehillim. We actually say that it's part of our davening where it says, in Hebrew, it's Boinei Yerushalayim Hashem Nidchei Yisrael Lechanis. It means Hashem will rebuild Yerushalayim and will gather all the Jews that were dispersed or pushed out of Israel. So the order is First, he'll rebuild Yerushalayim, which means the Beis Hamikdash, and then he'll gather everybody together. That's what it says in the pasuk. That's one source. There's another source. It's called Tanchuma. Tanchuma is a medrash where it says, no, Yerushalayim will not be rebuilt until all the exiles are gathered together. And where's his proof from? The davening, Shmona Esrei. If you look at the Shmona Esrei, we have many blessings. There's one blessing where we say, Tka b'shofar gadol, sound the great shofar for freedom, and we should gather together all the Jews from all over. Later, after that, it says, Boine Yerushalayim, Hashem, return to Jerusalem, your city, and have it rebuilt in our days. So first it says in gathering, and then it says Yerushalayim. So these are two opinions, what the order is going to be. And one is the opinion that's obviously, according to this opinion, what it says in the verse that the order looks different. So obviously he's going to explain that the order is not being precise. He's talking about two subjects, but the order is not necessarily precise. The real order is first all the ingathering and then building the Beis Hamikdash. Let's turn the page once. Next page. What does the Rambam say? Rambam is halacha. What does the Rambam rule? Oops, I forgot something. No, the Rambam agrees with the Zohar. What does the Zohar say? Envisioning redemption as follows. First, Moshiach appears, and he returns the exiled Jewish people to Torah. He brings everybody back to Judaism and to Torah. Then the second thing is he rebuilds the Beis Hamikdash. And the third thing is he brings all the Jews back physically, geographically to Eretz Yisrael. So that means the Rambam includes the ingathering of the exiles amongst one of those acts that confirms someone as Mashiach. And that's the third thing that happens. Nevertheless, if we merit supernatural redemption, we know the redemption can take place in two ways. One is in a natural order. That's why it says Mashiach will come riding on a donkey. The other is in a supernatural way. And that's alluded to where it says that Mashiach will come flying on a cloud. It means in a supernatural way. If we merit in a supernatural way, then it could be that the ingathering of the exiles will happen immediately, and then will be the Beis Hamikdash. But now, we mentioned this a few times, I'll just say it again. We always look to find a way to reconcile different opinions. In other words, when there are two opinions, it doesn't always mean that they contradict each other, but they're speaking from different perspectives, and or that both are true and both could be true at the same time. And that's what the next paragraph is going to be talking about. There's a possible way of reconciling both of these opinions. Because it says in Gemara, Elu va'elu divrei Elokim chaim, both these and these are the words of the living God. What does that mean? It's a general principle about two opinions in the Torah. Like when we study Gemara, we're constantly reading about different opinions. Shammai says one thing, Hillel says another thing. Rabbi Akiva says one thing, Rabbi Shmuel says another thing. At the end of the day, the halacha is one way, not the other way. So what does it mean that all the pages in Gemara and all the lines in Gemara that discuss the other opinion, they're not true? We're studying and learning and spending time studying something which is not true. So there's a principle, which is, this is the quote, everybody's opinion is true. They're both true. They're all true. And nevertheless, there's a way of reconciling both of them together. And then, of course, there's more depth to this. How can they both be true? Here, we're going to explain how they can both be true. Sometimes it's harder to understand. But right now, we'll talk about this. And that is, the final all-inclusive ingathering of the exile will follow and result from the building of the Beis Hamikdash. But some taste of it, preparation of this event will take place beforehand, as we see today. Basically, according to this, it's a possibility it'll take place like this. First, Jews will come from different parts of the world to Eretz Yisrael. Not everybody, but a certain segment of Jews. Then we'll have the Beis Hamikdash, and after it's built, then all Jews will come to Eretz Yisrael. So both are true. In a way, the building of the Beis Hamikdash comes after the people returning, in a way, the people started returning even before the Beis Hamikdash. In fact, we know that the Rebbe said what we see today, what we're witnessing today, which is really something incredible, that Jews from all over the world, since 1990, 91, I mean, in general, people have been going to live in Israel, but in 1991, when the doors in Russia opened up, hundreds of thousands of Jews came to the land of Israel to live there. And the Rebbe said, this is not just an ordinary event. We should look at this and perceive this as the beginning of the process of Jews coming back to Eretz Yisrael. It's one of the things Moshiach is going to make that happen. So that means it's already in process, but not complete. When the Beis Hamikdash will be here, it'll be complete. Yeah.
Even if the motivation is anti-Semitism or war or whatever,
Right.
it's not I'm going by myself just because I want to be there.
Right. So the truth
Is there a
is,
difference?
the truth is there is a general difference, but in fact, the Rebbe pointed out that when Jews went there in the 1948, they were running away from the Nazis, and it was a different kind of motivation. But when they went there in 91, 92, when things changed in Russia, and they went there because they wanted to be in Israel. But apparently, now that we're already in this era, so even if a Jew is going there because of other ulterior motives and reasons, I guess deeper down, it's really because Hashem is guiding him to go to Israel. It's like people go to Shul on Yom Kippur because they want to hear the cantor sing so nicely. In their minds, they're going to hear the cantor sing. But the real truth is that it's Yom Kippur, it's a holy day, and their neshama is sort of pulling them into Shul. So the same thing here, that even though people have maybe other motives, but in reality, we're in that era, and for every person, it's a different reason that's bringing them and leading them to live in Eretz Yisrael. And the Rebbe explained the following. What's the difference between the two scenarios? Here's the next paragraph, but let me explain it, is that if we say that the Jewish people have to come to Israel first and then you build a Beis Hamikdash, that shows the importance and the greatness of the Beis Hamikdash. That in order for the Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt, it's not enough that we have the land in our hands and the Arabs will move away and say, we give you full permission, we're not resisting, you can build the Beis Hamikdash right here. We also need all the Jews to be living there, which means once all the Jews live in the land, there's a much greater presence of godliness, and then we can build the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, the Beis Hamikdash will be built in a more perfect way. If it's the reverse order, that first the Beis Hamikdash is built, and then the Jewish people will come there, that means we're focusing on the perfection of the Jewish people, that our coming to Israel will be in a more perfect way. In fact, like you just said, people could be coming to Israel, and even though the real reason is because Hashem wants everybody in his homeland, but in his mind, this person's going because they'll be able to have a better job. This one's going because he's running away from a danger. And this one's running because he's running away from anti-Semitism. But if the Beis Hamikdash will be built, everybody's motive will be in a much more pure way, that they're going there because of the holiness. Once the Beis Hamikdash is built. Yep.
So, like you said, when Moshiach comes, like, all the Yidden are going to be going to Eretz Yisrael and, like, godliness is going to be revoked. So there's not going to be any such thing as, like, a person who doesn't want to go. Because, like, obviously everyone's going to want to go, right?
Right. Ultimately, that's what's going to happen. And ultimately, what's also has to happen is that people don't even know that they're Jewish are going to find out somehow or other and become aware of it, that they are Jewish. And they're also going to want to be part of it.
And did the Rebbe ever touch on, like, the people who, like, thought that they were Jewish their whole life, and then, like, when Moshiach comes, they realize that maybe they're not?
I don't remember. If I don't remember, I can't say I didn't do it, but I don't know. Now the question is, who will build the Beis Hamikdash? Some of you brought up this question, so now we'll discuss it. This on page 169. I mean, on top of the page, it says 169. The central phase of the transition from Geula to Geula is the building of the third Beis Hamikdash. Like once we see that, we know we've now totally, completely entered the phase of Geula, which will confirm that the presumed Mashiach is indeed Mashiach, but still there are two opinions. According to the Zohar, Hashem himself will build the Beis Hamikdash, rendering it eternal, unlike its man-made precursors, which were made by man. In other words, the Zohar says the first Beis Hamikdash was built by man, it was destroyed. The second Beis Hamikdash was built by man, it was also destroyed. The third Beis Hamikdash is meant to last forever, for all of eternity. So who's going to build it? Hashem, who is himself eternal. So it'll be built that way. That's what the Zohar says. Rashi, what does Rashi say? Rashi, which is a commentary on Chumash, but he also has commentary on Gemara. So in Gemara he writes, based on the verse, your hands have established a sanctuary of Hashem. Rashi says this means that the third temple will come straight from heaven. It'll be a miraculous structure that'll come down from heaven. Then there's another source, which is the Medrash, that man will build the final Beis Hamikdash. So what's the halacha? Rambam, who writes halacha, he writes that Moshiach will build it because it's a commandment incumbent upon the Jewish people. We have an obligation to build it, so we're going to be the ones building it. So again, are these two contradictory opinions, or there's a way of reconciling these two opinions? So here also there's a way of reconciling both opinions. One of the things the Rebbe loves to do in his sichos is to do just that, find two opinions, first talk about how they're so contradictory and they're opposite each other, and then show actually they complement each other and they come together. There's no contradiction here. The Jewish people will build part of the Beis Hamikdash, just like with the adding of the exile. A part will be built by humans, and there'll be another part that'll be built by Hashem himself. What does it mean? Think of it this way. Actually, it says that right now there's a Beis Hamikdash that's built in heaven, in Shemayim, but that Beis Hamikdash is not made out of wood, it's not made out of stone, it's not a physical structure. It means there's something spiritual up there, which will give life to this physical Beis Hamikdash down here. In a sense, it's like a soul and a body. Just like humans have a body and a soul, animals have a body and a soul. So the Beis Hamikdash also has a body and a soul. The body is the physical structure, which is made out of stone, but there's going to be a spiritual presence in the Beis Hamikdash, which will give it life. That spiritual presence right now is already up there, waiting to come down. When the Beis Hamikdash is built, it will come down. So when we say that we'll build it and Hashem will build it, both are true. We'll build the body, the physical structure, and Hashem will send the soul. In a sense, it's like a human. The physical body is created by the parents, by humans. The soul, and Hashem puts the soul into the body. That's why it says that every person there's three partners to the creation of every person: the father, the mother, and Hashem. Because the parents give the physical and Hashem gives the spiritual. So we will build the physical structure and Hashem will send down sort of the soul of the Beis Hamikdash. This resolution also explains why Rambam doesn't mention it. Because Rambam is a work of halacha. And he writes what the obligation of halacha is. So he doesn't write about spiritual things that are going to happen. But the Zohar, which is a book of spirituality, and he goes into the essence of things, therefore, when he talks about the Beis Hamikdash, he describes how it's going to come down from heaven. Now he goes into another way that we can reconcile both opinions. Page 170. So he says the man-made and the divine components of the temple will combine in several ways. Number one is what we just said. Number two, there's a verse, her gates sank into the ground. This is in the Medrash, and these are the words of a verse in Eicha. Eicha is Lamentations. That's the book which was written by the prophet Yirmiyahu, where he describes the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And over there, he writes that the gates sunk into the ground, which means when they came to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem made a miracle that the gates through which you enter the Beis Hamikdash, they weren't destroyed by fire, but they actually sunk into the ground, and they're hidden there. So it says in the Medrash that the gates of the Beis Hamikdash are buried on the Temple Mountain. When the third temple will descend from heaven, even if we say that it comes down from heaven, the gates will rise up and reinstate themselves in the proper place. but that'll be with man's help. And there's a halacha that how do you acquire a house? When you buy something which is an object that you can carry, you have to lift it. When you lift it, it becomes yours. What about something like a building? You can't lift a building. So how does it come yours? You have to write a contract. And when you give the contract to the other person or you give money, these are ways of acquisition. One of the ways of acquisition in a house is if you do something that's significant to the house, that's a sign of ownership. And one of them is if you build the door, for example. So what he's saying here is Hashem will send the Beis Hamikdash down from Shemayim. We will build those doors that come from under the ground. Hashem will show it to us and we'll build it. So by us building the doors, it's as if we built the whole temple. So therefore, both are true. Hashem will do that part and we'll do this part. Then there's a number 3, another interesting interpretation. The temple dimensions, which means the actual measurements of things, are recorded in a tractate called Midas. We just mentioned it. And they're different than what it says in the book of Yechezkel, which is also the third temple. Since all this is very unclear, we will build the Beis Hamikdash according to the measurements in the Gemara, because that we could understand. And whatever furnishings are described in Yechezkel, which we don't understand, that'll descend from heaven. So basically he's saying that even physically, we're going to build a Beis Hamikdash in a certain way, and then from Hashem, from heaven, we'll reorganize it according to the way that it's supposed to be from heaven. And we'll soon explain there's something deeper about these two scenarios. So basically, even from everything we said until now, whether Hashem will build it completely, whether he'll send down the soul, whether he'll build this part, build that part, either way, we see clearly that Hashem will have his input in the third Beis Hamikdash more than the first and the second. So he says there's a verse in Tehillim, chapter 127, where it says, unless Hashem builds the house, its builders labor in vain. The Zohar says that this is referring to the first house and the second house. The first Beis Hamikdash was built by humans, had no future. The second Beis Hamikdash was built by humans, eventually was destroyed. The third temple was built by Hashem and will last forever. So many statements affirm that the third Beis Hamikdash will be eternal. Another one is where the Gemara says that Avraham Avinu, when he spoke about the Beis Hamikdash, he referred to it as a mountain. Yitzchak, when he referred to Beis Hamikdash, he referred to it as a field. And Yaakov referred to it as a house. So the commentators write that these three terms refer to the three temples. Significantly, neither a mountain nor a field is a permanent dwelling place. A house is a permanent dwelling place. So if a person is living in a field, that's not a permanent place. If a person is living in on a mountain, it's also not a permanent place. A house is a permanent dwelling place, meaning to show that the first Beis Hamikdash and the second were not permanent dwelling places. The third is. And because of that, there has to be much more input of Hashem himself. Now, the last thing is going to explain that there's a certain advantage in the first, there's a certain advantage in the way the second one was built, and each one has an advantage and a disadvantage. And the third one is going to be a Beis Hamikdash that has the advantage of the both, of the first and the second, without the disadvantages. Let's see if we can explain that. The third Beis Hamikdash will encompass the advantage of the first two temples, but not the disadvantage. It means like this: the first temple was built during the times of Shlomo HaMelech's life. That was the climax of divine revelation. Jewish national spirituality. You know that Shlomo HaMelech was during his kingdom, that was the best time for the Jewish people in the history of the Jews, before and after. In fact, it's pointed out that he was the 15th generation from Abraham. We know that Moshe was the 7th. from Moshe till Shlomo Melech was 7 more leaders. He was the 15th. King David was the 14th. He was the 15th. Being that kingdom and the Jewish people are compared to the moon, if you think of the moon is bigger, the moon is smaller. But when is the time of the month where the moon is the brightest is the 14th and the 15th.
Wow. Wow.
I was trying to figure it out, because it was like the 17th was coming.
Right. My son once had someone sitting by the Seder, and she said, it wasn't religious, but she was joining the Seder. And she said, I noticed something really interesting about Passover. And I paid attention. Every year, whenever there's Passover, there's a full moon. Every year. And the reason is because it's always the 15th.
Is Hanukkah the only month that's not on the 15th? No, Shavuos is not.
Shavuos is not?
Rosh Hashanah, I guess none of
Most of them are not.
No.
them.
Pesach is
Pesach, Purim, Sukkot.
and Sukkot, those 3.
Okay.
Can you repeat again, please?
What I'm saying is,
The Jewish people are.
it says
compared-
first of all, it says that the non-Jewish nation, when they count the months of the year, they go by the sun. We go by the moon.
We go by them.
Also, in terms of comparison, the sun represents the nations of the world, and the moon represents the Jewish people. One reason is because we're the smallest, and they're much more. And the other reason is it sort of represents the pattern and the life of Jews during the time of Gullus, where it gets brighter, then we lose the light, then it gets brighter again, the ups and downs of Gullus. And also it represents humility. There's many things about why that is. It also says it represents kingdom. Once a month, if you see it on the outside without knowing, you're wondering, what are these guys doing? Once a month, the men go out into the streets and they make a bracha with a new moon. You ever see how it's done?
No.
They make a blessing over the new moon. Usually it's done with a lot of singing and dancing and celebrating. And by the way, that's the source where the words come from, David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, because the moon is compared to kingdom, and specifically King David's kingdom. And we're saying, in fact, in the prayers we say, look at the moon. It got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And it looks as if it's disappearing, and then it rises again, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter, and get the brightest. So we are compared to the moon in many different ways. If we look at the moon, we know that the brightest point in the moon is the 15th. Shlomo HaMelech was the 15th generation from Avraham Avinu. And that's why it was the best time in Jewish history. First of all, he was a king that the whole world was subservient to him, all other nations, all other countries. There were no wars, there was no fighting, it was like a little bit like Moshiach times. It was the best time in Jewish history. So, and also spiritually, they built the Beis Mikdash for the first time. So godliness was revealed in an amazing way.
Aren't we like the 15th generation from them?
We from Shlomo Melech,
Yeah, I was wondering this question.
Shlomo Melech lived, the second Beis Mikdash was destroyed about 2,000 years ago. So he must have lived.
Yeah, but each generation is like 100 years, right?
Well, if you start calculating that way, anything could fit, anything could work.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever heard this. The Rebbe once said, it was actually on Purim, that somebody said that yayin, which means wine, and lekach, which means cake, are the same gematria. But if you count it, no, yayin is gematria 70, and the Hebrew word for cake is the gematria 138. So the answer is you take a little bit more wine, and the numbers come together. But there's a problem. 2 times yayin is 140, still not 138. So you take a little bit more cake. No, but then it's more than the wine. So you take a little bit more wine, take a little bit more cake. At the end, the Rebbe said, either you've taken so much wine and cake that the accounting equals out, or by that time you don't know whether it's wine or cake or whatever it is, and it's not a problem anymore. So if you want to make this the 15th generation, you have to do some strange calculations, because it's over 2,000 and probably 2000.
30th generation?
What?
2050?
I didn't. The generations goes by the leaders of the generation. I don't know if we know each generation who was the leader, how we count it, but definitely it's much more than 15.
You said that we go by the moon and the secular calendar goes by the sun. I heard that we go by the sun and the moon, and then the Arabs go just by the moon.
Generally speaking, we go by the moon. The only place where we find that we actually make reference to the sun is we say the sun has 365 days, and we also have 365 negative commandments. There's 248 organs in the body, and 365 is the days of the year that go so by the sun. So, it is a fact. There is a sun
Also,
year.
like seasons.
Right, in fact, Pesach.
Because we always need Pesach that in the spring.
That's why we do two others, because Pesach has to be in the spring. So we want the moon and the sun to sort of even out.
Right?
Yes.
We always need our Pesach to be in
You
the
were
spring.
explaining, I think,
And
last
then
class
Ramadan
how
can be any
the third
summer,
base of
winter.
Mikdash and the
So
eighth
that's like,
is also the
the
eighth
Arabs
base
go
of Mikdash.
strictly only by moon.
You're like, it could also be counted as the eighth.
In the class that I gave,
Yeah.
you mean
Yeah, yeah.
because you count all the sanctuaries that were built.
Yeah.
So let's see, the Mishkan in the desert was one. Then they had one in Gilgal, that's two. Then they had one in Shiloh, that's three. Then they had one in Nev and Given is 4, 5. The first base of English is 6. The seventh and the seventh, and the third is the 8th, right? But Samantha is saying that the third base of English will actually be the 8th sanctuary from the one in the desert. Also, it's interesting that what was the day that the base of English was actually finally began to be used? It was on the 8th day of Tishrei. I mentioned it this morning. Those were here. Also 8. Because 8
day of
Tishrei. Between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it was the 8th day of Tishrei. And in our parsha, they celebrated for 12 days. In the times of King Solomon, they celebrated for 14 days. Okay, so the first base of Mikdash was during Shlomo Melech's lifetime. That was the climax of divine revelation. Everything was good physically. Everything was great spiritually. But we yet were not really prepared for able to contain and retain such a godly light. As a result, idolatry and false prophecy became rampant. And that culminated in the destruction of the first base of Mikdash. That's one. The second base of Mikdash was different. It was not built during such a splendid time in Jewish history. We were living in foreign countries. Actually, the initiative to build the base of Mikdash came from a foreign king, Koresh, who was the king of Persia at the time. And there was much less divine revelation even in the temple. There were 5 things in the second temple that were missing from the first temple. And one of the main things is the Aron, the ark that had the luchas, the holiest part of the temple, was missing. And there were a few other things, 5 altogether. And we did a lot of tshuva, and that's why we merited to have the second base of Mikdash. So for this reason, the second base of Mikdash lasted longer than the first. But still, it was destroyed because eventually destroyed for inspiration from below cannot endure without revelation from above. So we need to think from above as well. The third base of Mikdash lies in the unique combination that there'll be a great revelation from above. We from down here, because we've gone through so many years of exile, we refined ourselves, and now we could contain and retain that great revelation from above. So therefore, the third will be, in a sense, a combination of the first and the second, and we'll have the highest levels of godliness, and we'll be able to retain it, and it'll last. I think you were going to ask a question, no? Alex, you going to ask a question? No? I thought you picked up your hand. Maybe we're just waving. And of course, the third base of Mikdash will be not only a place where the Yidden will be there, but it says that it'll be such light of godliness shining that all the nations of the world will go there. In fact, there's a verse in Yeshayahu where it says, many nations will go and say, let us go and call to the mountain of Hashem, to the house of God, of Yaakov. And that's going to be when the third base of Mikdash will be built. So not only they won't be against it, and they won't be resisting, and they won't be fighting, but they themselves will actually be those that are going there to bring sacrifices and also be part of the third base of Mikdash. So if we're going to have it now, we'll be able to bring the Korban Pesach. It's another subject, but hopefully next week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'll go back to complete the subject of Chis HaMesim, which we started. So good Shabbos, everybody, and happy Shabbos Mevorchim. Yes.
You actually had a question, but it's not about classes.
Oh, okay. I
So
knew you
I
had a
don't know,
question.
Yeah.
Mendel Talabia.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Yes.
So basically, it's like not a great topic, but my sister has this friend that her and her brother went to Catholic school their whole life, but they're Jewish. But their mom was like, I grew up like Jewish, but I just want them to have God, so I just put them in the school. So I'm wondering like if there's any way I can like, you know, help them a little bit and be like, hey,
Kidnap them,
you know.
bring them here,
And then
lock
run.
the door, and let them say, I want Judaism.
Yeah, these are practical solutions.
Yeah, for sure.
I think send them maybe something like little. We have these little brochures like a L'chaim, something about Judaism that you feel it's light and they can relate to it.
Yeah.
Because when a person studies Torah, Torah has in it the property to refine a person
Yeah.
and to make them closer. So if you send them words of Torah in one way or another that they could
I don't
handle,
want it to seem like, you know,
that you're trying to do something.
You don't want to sing to you or
to
to
them.
them?
To them. For me, I know what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
Did you say that the mother sent them to Catholic school because she wanted them to have a connection to God?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Let's treat
I
this
know,
mother
right?
first. We have to treat the mother first. So she reverts
Yeah.
and then she takes them
Wow.
out.
Yeah. Wow, that would be nice. I think she's almost done with high school, so it's a little.
Where is she?
Where?
They
Long
live,
Island.
they live with her.
Yeah.
If you have a relationship with them, there's nothing wrong with saying, wow, I saw this thing that's very inspiring, and you send it to them, a small little thing.
And not really.
No.
Like I used to like be around them more often, but just like when I went away to college, I just stopped being like going to all that stuff. So I don't know. My sister and her dance together.
I like.
That's how,
seeing
like,
it
we know them.
separated.
Mhm.
And my mom and her mother are friends. Pretty good friends.
So here's the maybe want to have matzah for Pesach for the Seder. Do they have a Seder?
No.
I wanna like see what I learned.
Maybe they get
Trade,
matzah,
like,
they'll have a Seder.
Okay, yeah.
Wow.
What about the
What is
Chabad,
like,
the shluchim of the area? How about they can help and
How
go
would they-
there?
Oh, what did I
Well,
learn?
if they would want to have a Seder, then how they even get to the shluchim? But if you give them matzah and tell them about a Seder and they read something, maybe they would have an interest.
Yeah.
Never underestimate.
Shluchim can help.
Never underestimate what's going on in the mind and the heart of anybody Jewish. Doesn't matter how they grew up. Doesn't matter that they grew up with Christianity. The neshama is like as powerful as ever.
Also, by the way, I just made that face because you called me my English name. I was so shocked. I don't hear that here very often.
All right, okay. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. It's just surprising. Rivka Lukin sometimes says it. I'm like, what?
They called you what?
My English name.
Which is?
It's Alex.
Alex. Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard that. I said, who is
I had a
Alex?
student there once, her name was Judy.
Yeah.
She told me that when before I knew Judaism, I only knew the name Judy. And I got involved, and I found out I have a Jewish name, it's Yehudis. I threw Judy out the window and I became Yehudis. And then a few months later, Judy and Yehudis became the same person. There's a little, very deep thought there, but I didn't mean to call you Alex, it just came
No,
out.
that's
that way.
okay.
Thank
Good
you,
job,
Rabbi.
Miss.
Good job.
And in Hebrew is
Rivka.
Rivka.
Yeah. But I started going by it like a while ago, like probably over a
So?
year.
Não, não procurei mais.
Não procurou?